Hello to the chicos and the chicas. Today on the menu is going to be a game played by none other than me, and we are going to have a mystery opponent. I prefer not to reveal who it is, if for no other reason, for fancy's sake, so we can have a bit of a guess game down in the chat. Suffice to say, as per thumbnail, although I haven't made the thumbnail yet, so it may be different, but I'm going to tell you that my opponent is a former world number 2, someone who actually fought a battle for the world champion title and came out second best. And this is a blitz game between my opponent and myself, and I am behind the white pieces, and the game is going to kick off with the Queen's Gambit declined. And at this point, after 97, I was tossing up between various ideas, and eventually I settled for g3, mostly because I was hoping that my opponent would play c6 and go back to the Catalan Gambits style variations that I recommend in my d4 course. I also happen to remember that the early 97 in many Catalan lines is a little bit suboptimal, but in many lines, including the DC one, right away, it's totally fine. So I gambled a little bit because I'm not a Catalan player, but it's blitz, let's have fun. My opponent did take, which is the correct way to go about life. And then after queen a4, a6 takes, and then b5, we are going to land in some kind of a normal Catalan stuff. Maybe bishop g2 is actually a better move here for starters, because b5 can be met by knight takes b5. So anyway, I played bishop g2, still hoping that my opponent would play c6, but nah, he wouldn't have it. He played rook b8, and now I was completely on my own, and unfortunately this phase of the game was nothing to write home about. I played a4, this is to prevent b5, and making it a little bit harder for him to recuperate, or rather to hang on to the pawn that I am hoping to recuperate. Played bishop b4, logical, castles, logical, and after castles here I dropped the ball in a spectacular way, and I really still am kicking myself for this mistake, because obviously I wanted to play e4. Right, now e4 loses to bishop takes, pawn takes, knight takes e4, and we can put the pieces back in the box. So a logical move would be to prepare e4 by playing queen c2, and for the life of me I don't remember why I didn't play queen c2. I think I had some vague notion in my head about c5 being annoying, and so I decided to prevent c5 first by playing bishop f4, and then play queen c2 and e4, except that of course after queen c2 c5 we can play bishop f4, and this is extremely awkward for black with the rook on b8. And additionally to that, after rook a8 I have bishop d6, which hits this one very hard, pins the pawn on c5 to the bishop on b4. It's all kind of mess that black does not want to get into. So yeah, that was a big miss by me. a6 was played, and at this point I was like, okay, well, you get to play b5, bud, and I'm gonna play e4. And this was basically the type of position that I wanted to get. Objectively, this is nothing, once again, to write home about. Black has no problems whatsoever, but I've got a very pretty center. I've got lovely developed pieces. The rooks are going to come to the files. I would take it, to be honest, any day of the week in a blitz game, and I wouldn't even fret to play this in an over-the-board environment. The opponent played h6. It was definitely a poor move. There was nothing to go to g5 anyway. Perhaps committing to the take followed by bishop b7 was the best course of action for black, immediately turning up the heat on e4 and preparing the trade of the heavies on the a file with an inevitable endgame scenario, slightly favoring black. Anyway, h6 was played, and now things are going to escalate a little bit. I played e5. And this was the move that announced basically what was to come, which was that I put all my eggs in one basket and I went like, kingside attack, baby. And for that, I'm using my Kasparov e5 pawn. I have written an entire chapter about this pawn in my king safety course, which of course is a super important outpost, or a sort of a tool that you would like to have when you're attacking on the king side, because this pawn kicks out the most important defender of the king, the knight on f6. and that enables you to have more space than usual on the king side. And so all kinds of king side attacks that you are conducting when you have a pawn on e5 or with black a pawn on e4 are more likely to be powerful than without. Knight h4 was played. This is a very cheeky move that I didn't even consider that it could be met by g5, because I considered g5 so utterly ugly, and I just thought to myself that a player of any class would not even look at that, which is a typical pompous and slightly cocky way of thinking in my place, because of course, as luck would have it, g5 is by far the best move for black. My plan was to simply take here and then mop up the point with queen g6, except that black's rook b6 completely demolishes my main threat. And although white does have some initiative here, I thought that this would be carnage after bishop d5, and instead we have got a maybe I'm not gonna die immediately type of scenario. Anyway, the idea of knight h4 though is valid, and I want you to be aware of that, which was to either chuck a knight on f5 or to withdraw the bishop from f4 and go for f4, f5. In hindsight, the latter was the one to go for, but from which you already figured that I went for the former. Having said that, to my defense, I always dislike it when I have this pawn structure with the 4 versus the 3 on the king side, which looks like a really fluid and super easy attack. You just go f4, f5, f6 and checkmate. Except that it's black to move now, so let's assume that they play bishop e6, which is a perfectly valid developing idea, and after f4 comes the move that I really hate facing in such structures, and that is f5. Now, if there ever was a party pooping move in game of chess, that's the one for ya. And I don't have a good response. If I take, my entire kingside attack has vanished. It vanished in thin air as if it never existed in the first place. If I don't take, once again, where is my attack? There isn't one. Or it's not so easy to see what sort of a progression I can drum up here. g4 would be the optimal move to play, but that hangs the knight. If I move the knight, then g4 loses its power, because when I take, I don't have the subsequent f5 push. And so that was the reason why I very briefly did look at bishop e3 and opted out, and I decided to chuck a knight at f5, literally to stop f5. The downside of this move is that now my kingside progression becomes really, really problematic. It looks intimidating, which is a great thing in blitz, but against the former world number 2, intimidating is not gonna cut it. Rook e8, computer's favorite move. Bishop e3. I am just, moving to and fro here. It's just, and I'm not doing anything spectacularly clever here. I wanted to put the f-pawn in motion at least to f4, and then maybe sack the knight on g7 or h6 and then f5, which is what's gonna come, by the way, spoiler alert. But it's at the best of times vague. It is vague at the best of times. Bishop f8, f4, b4. His plan is very clear. He wants to kill me with b3 and then some kind of a breakthrough, and then just utilize the pawn majority on the queen side. So off I go is the name of the game. b3 was played, queen f2 was played, and he played bishop d7, and that was the first sign of indecision where I thought, I reckon the trends are shifting to my favor. Because this seemed to me to be an extremely timid move without any particular purpose other than connecting the rocks, which didn't seem to me to be a top priority at all. So I'm like, okay, that is giving me time to drum up my attack, so I will play queen g3. And now I am having quite an annoying presence on the g file, and my potential sacks followed by f5 followed by g5 will become quite bitey, quite annoying. Turns out I didn't need any of this. Right away, go for the kill, bruv. Take, and f5 would have immediately stirred up the pot in a major way, and black is forced to find here some remarkable defensive ideas. The first one being queen e7, which is the most counterintuitive move on the board because of the f6 fork. But of course the tactics work out to black's favor, because after takes, all of a sudden I can't retake because of bishop takes. And if I go with the queen, it turns out that this endgame is entirely hopeless for white because of knight c4, and the b pawn is going to march in like a champion. So yeah, yeah, I don't really blame myself for not seeing that. Queen g3 was played with the intention though of turning on the fireworks, and fireworks, here they come. Boomski takes on h6. Another mistake. It turns out that taking g7 is the more accurate way to go about life. And the reason for that is that no matter what takes back, when I play f5, the subsequent f6 is gonna be a tempo. And by the way, here too, the most insane defense is the only way to hold the fort by black, which is queen c6. Already a move that makes you go like, what is going on here? The idea being that if f6, then queen e6, and if I take this, then the queen takes on g4, and all of a sudden the queen, that was the worst piece on the board and the most inefficient defender, has become the #1 hero of the game, protecting the black king from all kinds of harm. Remarkable feat by the engine for finding this. And of course, to make matters worse, if I play g5 here, which was plan B, then comes bishop takes, rook takes, and queen g6 again, patching up those weak dark squares, and black remains slightly, ever so slightly ahead. But this is already a tall ask from anyone other than an engine to find queen c6 here. Instead, I went knight h6, and the big difference is that now f6 is not a tempo. And my opponent could have utilized that again and exploited that by playing queen c6. Instead, they went c3. Very logical. And I'm like, matey, I'm coming after ya. And I played g5. And it turns out that this move actually is just one tempo too short. Chess is the tragedy of the one tempo, in case you didn't know that. To put it plainly, after cb2, I was hoping to make g6 work. And the engine, who knows no limits when it comes to being cruel, tells me that the insane bishop takes f5, gf7, king f7, rook takes f5, king e7, double exclamation mark, with the idea of a cheeky king d8, is actually winning for black. Because the kingside attack is over, and I don't really have realistic hopes to be able to deal with the b2 pawn without losing heavy material. Totally insane stuff. Absolutely top level insanity. Neither of us saw any of this, needless to say. My opponent pushed past, which is the human move, but now it is a catastrophic collapse on the black side. g6. And now this is going to rip the black king side apart. And there is no hope left whatsoever. Now the extra tempo is on my side, because the pawn is still 2 moves away from promotion, and I already have a mate in free threat by take, queen g6 check, king e7, and queen f6. So f6 was more or less forced, but after e takes f6, it is just way too many pawns in front of the black king. They are not the cliched or the classic case of a umbrella pawn. These are vicious attackers. Rook e3 was played, queen. I actually pushed in the check first, which is a major inaccuracy according to the engine, who prefers to take first and then push the pawn. Yeah, apparently now, if I take this boy here on e3, then after queen c6, all of a sudden, my pawns have been blockaded again in the most annoying fashion. This queen c6 move keeps on coming back and biting me in the back. So instead I should have taken e3 here. And for comparison's sake, I will show you that if they play queen c6 now, then I have queen g5 with the idea of check, and then f6 is gonna be mate. Yeah, those nuances, they are the difference between you beating the world number 2 or not. Well, in this case it wasn't, because they went to king h8, allowing me to finish the game off. Although, I'm a bit reluctant to admit this, guys, but I missed the mate here. I played queen g5. Obviously, check and then checkmate is the threat. He took on f5, which I took, which was best. And now after bishop h6, I missed a very, very embarrassingly simple mate in 3. And in fact, if you really want to have some fun and prove yourself to be a superior player than me, please pause the video, figure out the mate in 3. Yep, so that would have been check, bishop here takes the pawn, and then queen h6 check. I got down to 30 seconds by now, and I was very nervous because I knew I was gonna win, and I didn't want to botch it, which is not very often that I get nervous, but this one, I went like, if I botch this, I will be hating on myself for a long, long time. So I went check, I then pulled back because by now I figured out the winning motif, which after bishop h6 is a mate in 5. This time around, and I did see that, so that's just a testament to, yeah, what a brilliant mind I am that I missed a mate in 3, but I did see the mate in 5. So for a second exercise, if you would like to work with me, it's a mate in 5. Can you find it? And I'm going to show you now how that goes. That is f8 queen. Obviously the bishop can't take, because then queen check can mate on h7, so the queen has to capture. And after takes comes the key move. If you take, it's not gonna work, because then the king is going to slip out. So queen check, king g7, queen h6 check, king f6, queen check, and king g5, and there is no mate, and black is threatening to promote with check. The clever check is not to take, but to go f6. And now with king g8, you have got a mate in 2 here. And if bishop g7, then you continue down the diagonal. This breaking the movement is what may make this look a little bit difficult or harder to solve. But luckily I saw it, and my world-class opponent resigned after queen d8 check. So, no, actually I think they resigned here already. Yeah, it was a really, really memorable win. I really enjoyed it. The game was just total bonkers city, utter chaos. I reckon that's the best fun that you can have in Blitz. And yeah, it's a major scalp. And without spoiling too much, I might have a follow-up to this video coming up soon. But this is it for now. Please don't forget, guys, to sub, to like, to comment, please. Please, chuck a comment and super thank me if you can. And I shall be back with the next video soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.